So in this lecture, we will finish implementing the bookmarking functionality. And remember that basically the only thing that is still missing is that when we bookmark a recipe like this, then we want that recipe to show up here in the bookmarks panel. So right now that is still empty and we only see this friendly message here. And so let's now go fix that. So taking a look at our markup here, we can see, right here. So we can see that in the bookmarks, we will actually have also the preview element. So this one here. So basically a list element with the class of preview in it, just like we had here for the search results. And so this is actually the exact same code. And so now in order to create this bookmarks view, I can actually simply go ahead and copy this one here from the results. Okay, so at least for now, by the end of this video, we will then kind of refactor all this. But for now, let me simply copy the code here and here create the bookmarks view.js. And then here, of course, it is called bookmarks view. Okay, then we also need to change the parent element, which in this case will be this unordered list called bookmarks list. Right here. And here the error message should be no bookmarks yet. Find a nice recipe and bookmark it. All right, but the rest of the code here is actually going to be the same. And so let's now go here. So this one we can close. Let's now go to the controller and include that here. And let's actually do that below this one, just because it is so similar. So results and bookmarks. Or actually, let's do it here at the end, so that results and pagination stay together. And so now all we want to do, at least for now, is that whenever a new bookmark is added, we want to render the bookmarks view with all the bookmarks. So with the array of bookmarks. So that is right here in control add bookmarks. Here let's delete all these console.logs. And as always, add some comments. So add or remove a bookmark. Then here, update recipe view. And then here actually render the bookmarks. So that is bookmarks view dot render. And see how beautiful now everything comes together, or basically fits together. So we always have this render method, and we already know that we can call it on all the views. And so that's really nice about having an architecture structure like this. So that's going to be model.state.bookmarks. And so this is also the reason why in the state we didn't only store the IDs of the bookmarks, but really we stored the entire data about the bookmarks so that we can nicely display them in this list. So a list that will look exactly like the result list here. So this should now actually already be working. So let's click this one here now, edit as a bookmark. And now when we come here, then there it is. Great. So let's try another one. And our bookmark here is still there. Now, if we add another one, then now we have two of them. And you can see that it also already automatically highlights the current recipe. so the one we are currently seeing. So if we now go to this one again, well, then the spicy chicken should actually be the selected one here. And so apparently we still have some kind of bug. So basically what we have to do here is that each time that we display a recipe, we should probably update this entire bookmarks panel here. So this view, so that it can then basically select or highlight here the current recipe. So let's do that in the control recipe function. And you see that this one here is getting really crowded. So let's do that here. So bookmarks view dot update, and then again model dot state dot bookmarks. Okay. So let's add this one. Okay, that worked nicely. And now this one here became the current one. But now let's go to some other one, which is not any of the bookmarks. And so now none of them you see here is selected. And so of course that makes sense because, well, this is not one of the bookmarks. But now if we click here, then this one is of course the selected one. Now we can click here as well, because again, these elements here are basically just the same as these ones. So when we click here, it loads the corresponding recipe, and here the same. So you see that now we went back to this one, and this one got selected correctly, this one got selected correctly as well, and we also got the correct recipe. And that's just amazing. So you see how easy it is now to integrate a new feature like this bookmark feature when we already have a very nice architecture and structure in our code. Imagine that we had all of this code here simply in one huge messy file. Then how difficult would it be to keep track of all the data and of how these different functions all interact with one another? Now, just to finish, we need to fix the fact that these two views here are essentially the same. So at least the markup that they generate is in fact exactly the same. And so that is of course not good. So what I will do now is to basically implement a view that is kind of a parent view of these two views. And that will be called the preview view. So because this element here is called preview. And so then that can contain all of these methods here. And then in the generate markup of these two, we will then use those two. So, but instead of explaining it, let me actually show it. So that's preview view.js. And now let me get all of this here. All right. So this will now be called preview view. And what this view will do is to basically only generate one preview element like this here. All right. So this one will not have any message. It will not have an error message. And the parent element is also not important. So just follow me here for now, and I will explain why that is. So here I will simply select everything. Or in fact, I could simply set this here to an empty string. So we don't need any parent element here. And actually this here is only the generate markup. And here we don't need any of this. Okay, so again, this preview view will only generate the markup for one of these preview elements. All right. And so now let's come here to the bookmarks view and get rid of this method here. So that we don't need anymore. And now here comes the magic. So as I mentioned before, we will use the preview view kind of as a child view of the bookmarks view and of the results view. So let's import the preview view here. So import preview view from .js. And now what we will do here is to still loop over this .data, which is still all of the bookmarks. But now what we want to do here is to call basically this generate markup. However, that would not really work. And so what we really want is this. So result, and then for each of them, we want preview.render actually. So with the result. But actually that is not all yet, because like this wouldn't work. But let's quickly analyze what is going to happen here. So it's these three here. So as the render method on bookmarks view is called, so this render method, it will set the data on the bookmarks view, and then it will generate the markup. So it will call this method here. And so this gets access to this .data, and then we map over that data. And so for each of the results, or let's actually call it bookmarks here. So bookmark. So for each of this bookmark, so not bookmark. So for each of the bookmarks, we want to then render a preview. However, here we actually need to return a string. So all of this should be a string that we need to return from the generate markup method, so that then in the view, it can insert that markup into the DOM, right? However, by having render here, preview.js itself will try to render some markup. And so that is not really going to work. And so what we will do is to change our render method here and add a second parameter to it. So here we will add a parameter called render, which by default will be set to true. So then all of this here stays the same, but if render is false, which is what we will set it to in a minute, so if render is false, then we actually want to return this markup that was just generated. Now, why don't we simply call generate markup itself without messing with the whole render method? So here, why don't we simply call preview view.generate markup? Well, that's because we still needed to set the data property to the data that we passed in. So that then here in the preview view, we can use this keyword. And so actually we need to now replace result by this.data. So this.data and then all of that. Okay. And so here we want to render it and set the render parameter to false. Okay, so that was a lot to take in. So let's recap what happens here. So the first part I think is obvious. So what happens when bookmarks view.render is called? So we then enter this method here. Now, since we didn't duplicate the same code here of preview view, so basically this way here of generating this preview, we essentially separated that into its own child view. And so then here in the bookmarks view, we try to render basically that view for each of the bookmarks. But instead of actually rendering it to the DOM, we simply have the render method return the markup as a string. So that's why we set it here to false, which will then trigger this code here, right? And so then all of this here will basically become a string, And so in the end, we end up with an array of strings, so because of map, and then in the end, we join all of that together and end up with a big string with all the markup that we want to render. So let's see what happens here. So as we click, let's see the console here, and it looks like we didn't get any error. And so indeed, now here our bookmarks still work. Now the search here will not yet work because we still need to put this here in the results view. But that's very easy. All we have to do now is to copy this code and put it here. And here we can now call this result, but of course it would have worked exactly the same way. And we also need to import the preview view. But that should be it. And so now these two views are essentially the same thing, with the only difference that they have a different parent element and a different error message, right? But the main functionality of them, so the main way of generating the markup, is essentially the same for them. And so in order to encapsulate that somewhere, we created another child class. And so that is, again, this one here. Okay, so please analyze this here after this video is done and really take a look at how the data flows between these different modules and between these different classes. All right, so let's see. And indeed, it still works. So here for now we get our message because we don't have any bookmarks yet. But as we click it, then that should appear there. Let's add another one. And beautiful. So that works great. Here we can then come back to the next one. And now let's unbookmark it. So it should disappear now. And now unbookmark this one as well. And then we get automatically this message here. So the no bookmarks yet message, which of course automatically comes here from this error message that we specified in this bookmarks view. So that's really great. So our application is becoming almost finished, actually. And now all that we want to do here to finish the bookmarks is to actually persist it between page loads. So right now, of course, this one here is bookmarked. But now as we reload the page, then that bookmark is gone, right? So it's no longer here, and it's also no longer up here. And so now what we're going to do next is to store our bookmarks data into the local storage. And then as we load the page, we basically get that data back.